Hi, Stoner Hill. I got a great book for you. It's called Encyclopedia Brown Finds the Clues. This is a skinny little book. Let's see how long it is. "88 pages. Okay, you can do it. This book, it says on the cover, Detective Services, 25 cents. This book is about Encyclopedia Brown. He's a detective, and I'm going to have to turn my lamp on to see. There are little short cases in the book that he takes care of. And so you read one little case, and there's a surprise at the end that you're going to see when we get to the end. So get ready. You'll like this. The case of the mysterious tramp. His head bent low over the handlebars of his bike. Encyclopedia Brown rounded the corner of Maple Avenue like high-speed sandpaper. It was 3 minutes before 6 o'clock of a summer evening. With a bit of luck and a falling wind, Encyclopedia hoped to make it home on time for dinner. Suddenly, someone called his name. Leroy Brown. Right off, he knew it had to be a teacher calling. Only teachers and his mother and father called him Leroy. Everyone else in the town of Idaville called him Encyclopedia. He didn't look much like an encyclopedia, which is a set of books filled with all kinds of facts, or even like one book. People called him Encyclopedia because he had read more books than a bathtub full of professors, and he never forgot anything he read. Leroy! It was Mrs. Worth, his old fourth grade teacher. She was standing beside her car looking very sad. "I can't get it going," she said. "Can you help me?" "I'll try," said Encyclopedia. He leaned his bike against a tree and raised the hood. "Start her again, please, Mrs. Worth," he said. The motor coughed and sputtered out. "The trouble must be in the carburetor," said Encyclopedia, beginning to disappear under the hood. He lifted off the air filter. Now he could reach the butterfly valve in the carburetor. He poked it open with his finger. The motor roared to life when Mrs. Worth tried to start it. Mrs. Worth was delighted. When Encyclopedia returned to view, she thanked him over and over again. "Golly, it wasn't anything," said Encyclopedia, "just a stuck valve." He smiled as Mrs. Worth drove off till he looked at his watch. It gave him unsmiling news. It was past 6 o'clock, the Browns' dinner hour. He'd catch it for being late. His mother put down a pot of boiled cabbage to stare at him. Dirt and grease from Mrs. Worth's motor coated him from ears to sneakers. "Where have you been?" she asked, kissing the one clean spot on his cheek. "Fishing," answered Encyclopedia. "In an oil well?" The water was so dirty, Encyclopedia said quickly. The goldfish looked like black bass. He didn't mention Mrs. Worth's motor. He seldom spoke to anyone, not even his parents, about the help he gave others. And he never spoke about the help he gave grown-ups. His mother looked out at Rover Avenue through the kitchen window. Oddly, she hadn't scolded him for being late. "Your father knows we were having corned beef and cabbage tonight," she said in a worried voice. "What could be keeping him?" "Dad wouldn't miss his favorite dish without a good reason," said Encyclopedia. "Maybe he's chasing a dangerous crook or something." Mrs. Brown looked even more worried. Encyclopedia tried again. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "Dad is the best police officer in the state. He'll be home soon." Encyclopedia was right. As he was washing the back of his neck, he heard his father close the garage door. A moment later, Mr. Brown entered the house. He was a big, broad-shouldered man dressed in a police chief's uniform. His uniform was the envy of every lawman in the United States. Although Idaville was like many other American towns, its police force was unlike any other. For more than a year, neither child nor grown-up had gotten away with breaking a law. Hardened criminals had passed the word. Stay clear of Idaville. This was partly because the Idaville policemen were well-trained, smart, and brave, but mostly it was because Chief Brown had Encyclopedia at the dinner table. Chief Brown never whispered a word of how Encyclopedia helped him. After all, who would believe the truth? Who would believe that a fifth grader solved difficult cases while eating dinner in the Browns' red brick house on Rover Avenue? Naturally, Encyclopedia never let out that he was the mastermind behind Idaville's war on crime. So the name Leroy Brown was missing from the honor roll of the world's great detectives. "I'm sorry to be late, dear," said Chief Brown as he sat down to eat. "A terrible thing has happened this afternoon." After he had said grace, he raised his head and looked at Encyclopedia. "Mr. Clancy, the plumber, was beaten and robbed." "Was he badly hurt?" asked Mrs. Brown. "He's in St. Mark's Hospital," Chief Brown said. "The doctors say he'll be all right. I'm afraid we'll never catch the man who attacked him." "Why not, Dad?" asked Encyclopedia. "Didn't anyone see what happened?" "John Morgan saw everything," said Chief Brown. "He's Mr. Clancy's helper. He was sitting in the truck when a tramp attacked Mr. Clancy." Chief Brown unbuttoned his breast pocket and drew out his notebook. "I wrote down everything John Morgan told me. I'll read it to you." Encyclopedia closed his eyes. He always closed his eyes when he did his heavy thinking on a case. His father began to read what John Morgan had told him about the beating and theft. Clancy was driving the truck, and I was sitting beside him. We had turned onto the dirt road near the Benson farm when the motor overheated. Clancy stopped, walked around to the front of the truck, and lifted the hood. As he took off the radiator cap, a tramp jumped out of the woods. The tramp struck Clancy on the head with a piece of pipe. Clancy fell over the radiator and slid down the front of the truck. I leaped out of the truck, but the tramp was already racing into the woods. He carried the pipe and Clancy's wallet. I let him go in order to get Clancy to the hospital right away. Chief Brown finished reading and closed his notebook. Encyclopedia opened his eyes. He asked but one question. Did Mr. Clancy have an unusually large amount of money in his wallet? His father looked startled. Why, yes, he answered. It so happened that Mr. Clancy had $200 in his wallet. He had just been paid for work on a new apartment. Here's a picture of the scene of the crime. House. Been paid on a new apartment house. What made you think he was carrying a lot of money? He had to be, said Encyclopedia. Now you should have no trouble finding the man who struck and robbed him. No trouble, said Chief Brown. The woods come out on the railroad tracks. It's a sure bet that the tramp hopped a ride on a freight train. He's probably in Georgia by now. You'll find him where John Morgan lives, and the $200 besides, said Encyclopedia. Do you think John Morgan helped the tramp rob Mr. Clancy? Asked Mrs. Brown. No, answered Encyclopedia. Well, what do you think? Asked Chief Brown. I think that when Mr. Clancy stopped the truck in the woods, John Morgan saw his chance, answered Encyclopedia. While Mr. Clancy was checking the radiator, John Morgan sneaked from the truck, knocked him out, and stole his wallet with the $200. It says on this page that John Morgan knocked him out. What about the tramps? Asked Chief Brown. There never was a tramp, Dad, said Encyclopedia. John Morgan made him up. John Morgan robbed Mr. Clancy by himself and then drove him to the hospital. Chief Brown rubbed his chin thoughtfully. That could be what really happened, he said, but I can't prove it. The proof is down in black and white, said Encyclopedia. Just read over what John Morgan told you. He gives himself away. How did John Morgan give himself away? Turn to page 89 for the solution to the case of the mysterious tramp. This is what happens at the end of every Encyclopedia Brown short story. They tell you how Encyclopedia solved it. So let me get to 89. Here I am. Looks like this. The solution to the case of the mysterious tramp. John Morgan said that Mr. Clancy walked around to the front of the truck and raised the hood. He describes how Clancy fell over the radiator and slid down the front of the truck after being struck by the tramp. Then he himself climbed out of the truck. But he said he'd been sitting in the front seat, so he saw the attack through the windshield. Impossible! The hood of the truck was raised, remember? And he's inside. He can't see past the hood. All John Morgan could have seen through the windshield was the hood. Chief Brown recovered Mr. Clancy's money. The guilty John Morgan was sent to prison. Check it out. These are in the library. There are tons of these. Really short little clips.